Not going to win. Now he's got the longer arms. He's taller.
Of Gennady. You see it's red, and there's a nice. Canelo loads up with a left. Started from his hip. It ended on the right cheekbone of Gennady's cut. Both men going with bad intentions. Canelo comes over the top with an overhand right, lands right to the left.
The power. And Floyd is fighting more offensively at this stage of the fight than is usually the case. Oh, that was... That's a power shot.
So much bigger physically than Cotto.
Oh, good right hand by Canelo.
Right out there with a beautiful straight right over the top, and his straight right has keel on it.
When Harold
and
Twitter can tell you the others, and there's a hard left hand for Canelo Albert. Freddie Roach is the greatest trainer in the sport.
Straight right lead, which he's not afraid of, throws a right uppercut, then slips the left hook. Wow, and the only punch he's caught by is
So far they're fighting
this fight. And Freddie Roach told us he was always been a quick starter.
hard right hand again.
shots. Offensive fight, but
And the two big right hands, that was a Mayweather round.
that confidence is what we're getting knocked out of. He's got
There's a straight right hand that lands. Power punches might Pacquiao be able to get going at some point. And there's the Mayweather right hand. Strafes the body with left and right.
He's using his right hand right now. He'll use the touch jab to land the right hand. In fact, he jabbed in two different places to try and land the heel of his glove. He's using some extracurricular activities as well. This was the counter right.
Canelo sticks the jab to the ropes with a jab, and there's a right hand to the body by Mayweather.
The counterpunching, the sharp counterpunching can be an intimidator.
Double jab through the guard, and that right hand, and what a sublime right uppercut up the middle. Alvarez standing flat foot on the ropes. The jab to the body. Look at this display.
Well, there's a brilliant start. A brilliant performance by Floyd. But you wonder if Corrales, in getting back down to 130 pounds.
Oh no. It's been a masterful job here. This has been a job of pure boxing. Pure boxing.
So it doesn't matter.
Use the jab all night.
And the second knockdown of the round for Mayweather.
There are 20 seconds left in the round.
And there's the third knockdown of the round. Looks as though Corrales will have a chance.
Come to me.
Here are the knockdowns, Larry.
The first one was right at the bell. Surprise. But the later ones, it appeared that Corrales was okay and aware of everything going on. But he's in a position.
Yo. CTB. Chin Tuck Boxing. I'm your boy Jay Slay. Show it up to him, man.
What's up, everybody? Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification button, comment. Let's keep this channel growing. You know why? Because we love boxing and you love boxing.
Most definitely. This is the place where the fight fans come to get these delicious entrees of boxing knowledge. What's on the menu for them today, bro?
And let's talk about Canelo and Mayweather, man. Let's talk about age 23, which was the year that Canelo fought Mayweather, and also the year that probably was a prime time for Mayweather. And let's compare both fighters to see who was the better fighter.
All right, man, let's chop it up, man. Let's talk about it. Yeah, man, recently, before the Billy Joe Saunders fight, Canelo was giving a press conference, and he said if he fought Mayweather in his prime, that he would beat Floyd. And recently, Floyd came out and said, you got to look at the age that I fought Canelo in. I fought Canelo when I was already in my 30s. Canelo was 23 years old when I fought him. He said, me at 23, I was a monster. I was undefeated. I was unbeatable at that age by any fighter in any era. So we here at CTB, you know, we like to chop that up, man. We like to dissect that and give our opinion on that. So yeah, I'm gonna start with you, man. You think there's any truth to what Floyd said about him being unbeatable at age 23? A lot of people wasn't around in boxing at that time to remember how good he was. Us being from that era, what do you think about Floyd, the pretty boy Floyd era?
Okay, age 23, around that time frame, to me, Mayweather was beatable. But I'm gonna tell you why he was beatable. As far as his talent and his skill set, I think to me, it might be debatable, but it could be the best skill set around that age ever, as far as how he looked in the ring. The only reason I say that Mayweather was more beatable than I would say maybe like a Mayweather around 30, 31. He fought Canelo at 36, 37. So that was an older Mayweather. But I'm talking about around that 31, 32 years old Mayweather, maybe late 20s. I think that Mayweather was a little bit better than the one at 23. And the reason why is because to me, that Mayweather exposed himself a little bit more. So he took more chances than he was at 29, 30. The one at 23, 24 was more athletic. He hit harder. He was more explosive. He was more dangerous. But he also put himself out there more. He fought more like Sweet Pea. So even though he was defensively responsible you still had a chance to catch him. But I think as Mayweather got older, it was almost impossible. It was almost like a glitch to even catch a Mayweather with more than one shot at a time. So to me, even though Money Mayweather was not as exciting and he was more about the money, and I still like Money Mayweather, he was so smart in the ring, his IQ was so high that he didn't give you an opportunity to really catch him, because you weren't going to beat him in a 12-round fight. But the one at 24, 25, 23 years old, he was a lot more explosive, but he was open slightly to where you may get lucky. And I'm saying lucky in catching him. So when he says he was unbeatable at 23, 24, I would say not quite, but I wouldn't really take nobody to beat that Mayweather.
I slightly disagree with you, man. I think that younger Floyd was a lot better, mainly because of health reasons. I think the older Floyd, he became a lot more defensive because he had bad hands. He was known for having breaking his hands in fights. Like, matter of fact, the first time he ever been down, he went down to the knee because he broke his hand around the age of 23. It's when he fought Castillo. He broke his hand in that fight and actually took a knee in that fight. And arguably, a lot of people say he lost that fight because of that. That I wouldn't go as far as Floyd said. I wouldn't say that he was unbeatable. Anybody can be beat at any point. I mean, it's different eras to the sport. So I wouldn't go that far and say he was unbeatable. But I say his prime, the Pretty Boy Floyd era, was his best era. Even though he monetized himself better in the Money Mayweather era, he took less offensive risk, like you said. But I think it was by design. He took less offensive risk because, one, he didn't have to. He didn't need to. He was fighting guys that were bigger than him, so he didn't really want to. That's one reason. And two, because he was known to break his hands in fights. So I think that was the main reason why. But yeah, look at the opponents he fought at 23. I'm gonna name a couple of them real quick. At 23, he was fighting the likes of, like I said, Castillo. He fought him at 24. Jesus Sanchez, Carlos Hernandez, and then probably one of his biggest victories of all time was Diego Corrales. And Emmanuel Augustus probably was one of his toughest fights that he would. I think he said it was his toughest fight. So at 23, at those opponents, man, I think he looked spectacular against those opponents, man. Especially Diego Corrales. People don't really know how much of a monster Corrales was, but he was known to knock everybody out. Everybody he touched, he knocked out. Floyd was the smaller man, and he was the underdog in that fight, actually. Mm-hmm. People thought that Corrales was going to be too big for Floyd. And Corrales actually stayed. I think Corrales actually stayed at that weight because he was supposed to move up, but he actually stayed at that weight to get a fight with Mayweather because they was talking so much trash to each other. Mm-hmm. So Mayweather knocked him down 4 times. But comparing that to Canelo at 23, he fought the likes of Floyd Mayweather. Give me a second. He fought Austin Trout, Hisancito Lopez, and Frelo Angulo. And you could possibly throw Anderson Lara in there. He was around 23, 24 around that time. Mm-hmm. Let's compare their opponents. At 23, who do you think was fighting the higher class of opponent at that point, at their career?
I would go with Canelo. And the reason why I would go with Canelo because he got Mayweather. He got Mayweather in there, so that's huge. So he fought Mayweather, and he also fought Austin Trout, and he had Lara in there. So and Mayweather had Corrales, And other than that, he had Hernandez. Hernandez was a big fight at the time. But Emmanuel Augustus, even though he was awkward, he wasn't considered a top-notch fighter. And I believe that if he had fought Emmanuel Augustus and Money Mayweather, he would have beat him a lot easier. But I would say Canelo at 23 has fought the better competition if you compare their resumes at that age.
I sort of agree with you, but only like you said because of the Mayweather stigma. He did fight the #1 pound for pound at that time, so it's kind of hard to give Floyd the edge on that. Because at Floyd's time coming up at 23, the #1 pound for pound fighter then was Roy Jones, and nobody seen it wasn't Mike Tyson, then it was Roy Jones, and nobody seen Roy Jones fighting Mayweather. That was just not even talked about. The weight classes was too far apart. But yeah, I don't know, man. What else you got to add to that? What they got to add to Canelo Alvarez recently coming out and saying that his prime for prime, he could beat Floyd? And what age group you think he would give Floyd the better run?
If you're gonna take Floyd in a prime, and when I say prime for Floyd was so good, you can go from 23 to like 32. Like, I mean, to me, unbeatable almost. If you take Canelo, I'm gonna just.
You was kind of breaking up a little bit. Can you repeat that?
Oh, as far as Canelo is Floyd was in his prime to me from like 23, 24 all the way up to like 32, where he was like almost unbeatable. Then you take that same Floyd those years and you take Canelo, which I'm gonna assume we talking about the Canelo now. I think he at his prime at 29 years old. I think Canelo's 29 or 30, and he at his prime. Now, for everybody that's listening, we're not talking about we're gonna take the weight out. So say, well, you can't do that because Floyd was 140 something pounds and he fighting at 168 now. So of course he couldn't beat Canelo. Take the weight out. We're going pound for pound. If you're gonna take just taking the weight out and you take Canelo prime and Mayweather prime, to me it would have been a contest. It would have been pretty much what you seen when they fought, but I think it would have been worse because Floyd would have been a lot more aggressive and he might would have stopped Canelo. So to me, I see what Canelo was trying to say, but it's levels to this, and it's nothing to be ashamed about because Floyd Mayweather is. Some people would think he's the best to ever lace up a pair of gloves. So to just say you lost to Floyd, that's not nothing to be ashamed about. But I just believe that they both was in their prime. He wouldn't stand a chance of beating Mayweather.
Yeah, I agree with you. You to me, I'm gonna make real common sense with it. You have to look at the age where they fought. Mayweather was 36 when they fought. Canelo was in his prime at 23. Even when he was young. He learned from that fight. He learned, and he changed his whole style based off of that fight. So if you say 23 wasn't his prime, you would say it was too green. Then you would have to take that Mayweather fight and say that he learned from that Mayweather fight. So let's say he did. Let's say they had a rematch in the future. And Floyd Mayweather was then still young then. You have to understand, Floyd, he doesn't lose fights. He's not gonna lose a fight twice. So if he already taught him one lesson, Floyd would know what he's coming with, and then in a second fight. And Floyd, like you said, Floyd will make it look easier. And we're not talking about the 36-year-old Floyd who was more defensive. We're talking about the pretty boy Floyd. He would have. I think it would have been a lot worse. It would have been a lot worse of a beating. And the first time, and the second time, I don't think it would have been a fair contest. I think Floyd fighting somebody the second time would have been worse. So I'm kind of like you. I wouldn't go so far as maybe saying a stoppage because I've never seen Canelo down before. But I would say it would be it would be more embarrassing than the first fight was, and that'd be my honest opinion. And like you said, there's no fouling that. Canelo's great in his own right. Canelo is the pound for pound king right now. He's the pay-per-view king right now, and Floyd had his time. It just so happened that they came with different eras. But speaking of errors, now let's compare the errors. Let's compare Floyd era to this era. How would you equate? This is kind of like the LeBron James and the Michael Jordan debate for a lot of younger people in our generation coming up who actually seen both. Compare the errors of the sport.
Okay.
Who do you think would have a better career? If you think Floyd would have a better career fighting in this era, or you think Canelo would have a better career fighting in Floyd's era?
Mayweather would have had a better career fighting in this era. When Mayweather was fighting in his prime, you gotta think you had Cotto, you still had Manny Pacquiao out there, you had Sugar Shane Mosley, and I ain't talking about the ones that he fought, the older ones. I'm talking about the younger versions. So you gotta look at who Canelo has fought. Canelo has fought. Billy Joe wouldn't be a great fighter in this era. I mean, not far as comparing those guys I just named. Laura, he's solid, but I wouldn't put him up there with those fighters. And then you have fighters like the last couple guys he fought from over there, Rocky Fielder, and so I mean, if this is his prime, and I'm not knocking him because I understand what he's doing. He's trying to get all the belts. I just don't think it compares to what Mayweather had to fight, because I'm thinking who has Canelo fought that you can say is a sure Hall of Famer? Is Billy Joe Saunders a Hall of Famer? You believe?
I mean, he fought some Hall of Famers, but you had to look at the age that he fought him in. Like, he fought Miguel Cotto, but that wasn't Miguel Cotto that fought Zav Judah and all Floyd Mayweather. He did fight what's the guy? Who else he fought? Shane Mosley. He did fight Shane Mosley.
He fought Shane, but it was old.
That wasn't the Shane Mosley that fought Floyd or that fought, that fought Miguel Cotto.
You got to think, Mayweather was so dangerous when he was in his prime that Sugar Shane Mosley, who was a hell of a fighter that beat De La Hoya, said he had to get his wisdom tooth pulled.
Yeah, he had a toothache.
The reason why he couldn't fight Mayweather.
Yeah. So
you got to understand that was a bad boy, man. Like, so I mean, don't get me wrong, Canelo is a bad guy, and I think he's doing everything he needs to do in the sport right now. But the competition level is not the same right now. It's just it's two different levels.
I kind of want to speak on the Shane Mosley statement you just made about the wisdom tooth. A lot of Mayweather haters don't remember that. They say that Floyd only fought fighters after they got older. A lot of people was avoiding Floyd, and Floyd don't get a lot of credit for that. Floyd was moving up in weight. Floyd probably walk around now at 150 pounds. Floyd never has weighed more than 152 on a good day. Yeah. He was fighting at 147. Half of these guys was coming in the ring weighing 180 or close to 180 on fight night. So even when Floyd was on the smaller weights, when he was fighting at 135, 140, Shane Mosley was the monster at 135.
Mm-hmm.
Shane Mosley, he did not want that fight. Like he said, he made number one, he failed a drug test. That was one reason, and two was because, like you said, the toothache thing. Floyd then turned around later on after he had his biggest win, which was against Margarito, and fought him again anyway. He still fought him after Shane Mosley came in the ring and made a statement. Floyd still fought him, and still Floyd got no credit for it. But back to the regular conversation. I agree with you when you said about the eras. Canelo, you have to look who Canelo had to fight in the Floyd era. Canelo, if you say Canelo's prime is at middleweight, let's look at middleweight who was there at Floyd's era. You had Roy Joneses, you had the James Tonys, Bernard Hopkins of the world. You know what I'm saying? Do you see Canelo having a good chance beating those guys?
Roy Jones would have been a disaster for him. Yeah. It could have been a disaster for him. So I'm not even gonna talk about Roy Jones. You saw not to be funny, you saw the trouble he had with Billy Joe in the early part of that fight. You see the trouble he had with Laura. So Roy Jones, the way he can move and how athletic he is, that would have been a terrible matchup. Now, as far as James Toney, I still don't give him the edge to beat James Toney, but I think it would have been a good fight. Yeah, but I think James Toney,
It'd have been a better fight than Roy, I think.
Yeah, it'd have been a better fight. So I think that would have been a close fight. And I think Bernard Hopkins would have been too much for him. I think Bernard Hopkins is too crafty. He would have known how to neutralize Canelo and take away his favorite weapons. And he would have found a way to win that fight, I think. So I think the only guy he could have beat out of those three is James Toney. And I think that fight would have been a close fight. But I think Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones were way too much for Canelo.
All right, now we got to be fair about it. So let's compare Canelo's era to Floyd's welterweight era. You have to look at the Errol Spences and the Terrence Crawfords, and the Ugases and who else? Danny Garcias, the Keith Thurmans, Sean Porters of the world. How would you think Floyd would fare at this era of welterweight?
I think he would have been better. I think this era is a little bit more weaker than the era that he fought in. So, man, I'm thinking out of those fighters you named, who would have maybe gave him trouble. And I think the only guy that would have gave him some trouble is probably, crazy it may sound, I think Sean Porter might could have gave him trouble just because of him being so active and just mauling him, kind of using the same thing Madonna did. But the problem with him is he don't hit hard. Miana, he hit hard. So Floyd had to kind of, people don't realize how strong Floyd is. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, look what he did in Miguel Cotto and look what he did in the Madonna fight. He pretty much came, even with the Canelo fight. That's one of the things that threw Canelo off was, if you watch the beginning of the fight, he expected Mayweather to be on his bicycle. And from the opening round, Mayweather stepped forward and it confused Canelo. He didn't know what to do because he didn't expect him to come forward. Watch that fight. That's one fight Mayweather did not run. He came forward the whole fight and pretty much walked Canelo down. So I don't think Errol Spence has quite enough tools. Like I said, I think Terrence Crawford would have been a good fight too, because Terrence Crawford got so many dimensions to him. So I think Terrence Crawford would have maybe gave him some trouble. And I really don't have anybody to compare from his era that fights like Terrence Crawford. So that would have been interesting to me. Keith Thurman just too weak. It is too weak. I don't think he got enough grit to beat Mayweather. So I think the only guy that maybe had a shot is Sean Porter and Terrence Crawford. Not to throw no shade at Errol Spence, but I think he done seen Errol Spence style before. I don't think he's never seen Terrence Crawford. And then Sean Porter, because of his work rate, could have made it interesting on the scorecards. But I think because of his lack of power, Mayweather would have figured him out and just would have probably been more aggressive with Sean Porter.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, man. I wouldn't even give Terrence Crawford a really, really good shot at. I think he would have figured Terrence Crawford out also. I kind of disagree with you, the Errol Spence thing. I think Errol Spence would have gave Floyd a little more trouble only because he's so big. And not only is he big, but I don't see Errol Spence fighting the way Canelo did when Canelo fought Floyd. I think Errol Spence will try to hurt. I think Canelo was trying to outbox too much. He was trying to outbox Floyd. And then when he tried to make it a rough on Floyd, it was too late. Floyd had him down. Floyd had him calculated and down packed and knew what he wanted to do. So he just came on too late. I don't see Earl having that problem, because Earl gonna come forward and throw and try to hit you with something. But I think Floyd will wind up finding out what his style was and wind up picking him apart. So yeah, man. I mean, this era just is not. I mean, who at welterweight back then would you compare to this era?
What now?
Like who would in Floyd era welterweight? How would you think they would? How do you think they would compare to the Canelo era welterweight? So you're looking at the Shane Mosleys of that era, the De La Hoya spots. De La Hoya was at 154. Who else was there? Zab Judah was coming up in weight.
Zab Judah was coming up to 147. You had his era was a little bit before, a little bit after, like Fernando Vargas.
Fernando Vargas.
They came a little bit before.
Yeah, they moved up in weight by that time.
Yeah, they moved up. So they were more the De La Hoya, Shane Mosley, Cotto, Paul Williams.
Yeah, forgot about Paul Williams.
Yeah, Paul Williams. That would have been interesting too. I think Paul Williams is too open, but it would have been a fun fight. It would have been like Corrales. It would have been another Corrales fight.
Yeah, just bigger.
I know
and
a lot
more
of people throw Paul Williams. Yeah.
Yep.
But he same thing. So I mean, that's how I feel about that. But a question though, why you talking about that? Why we talking about Mayweather? Do you have Mayweather as the best fighter ever?
I mean, people are gonna disagree with my best ever, but my best ever was Roy Jones Jr. But this is I'm a fan. I was a fan of his. He was the one who pretty much the first fight I seen that made me fall in love with boxing. Like the first fight I seen was him. I think the best ever is subjective. Like, to me, it's just like we made the LeBron James and Michael Jordan comparison. Every era had their best ever, pretty much. The same with basketball, the same with boxing. You know, boxing, you had the Joe Lewis's, and then you had like the Muhammad Ali's, and then you had the Mike Tyson's, and then you had the Roy Joneses, then you had the Floyds, and now you got the Canelos. And then after Canelo go, it's gonna be somebody else. You understand? So but we can sit back and compare eras. We can compare people in those eras. I mean, we can make fantasy matchups, but at the end of the day, it's all subjective, man. It's just like the pound for pound list to me. It's subjective. People feel that Sugar Ray Leonard would have gave Floyd issues. I beg to differ. I think Sugar Ray Leonard was easy pickings for Floyd, but that's my opinion. The same with Hagler. People think Hagler would have gave Floyd issues. I beg to differ. Even though they middleweight, but I think the style would be easy picking for Floyd. So I don't know. What you think about that question?
I agree with you. I think people like to talk about the golden age, which is the four with Hagler, Leonard, Duran, and I'm missing somebody, and Hearns.
Tommy Hearns, yeah.
And they like to name those four those four guys would have walked all over Floyd, and that's not true. For one, Duran was too small. He was way too small for Floyd. And also, if you saw the fight with him and Leonard, the second fight where he just put him up, boxed around the ring and made him quit, that's what Floyd would have did to him. Floyd would have been in front of Duran. So I think that Duran would have been easy work. Like you said, Hadler is kind of similar too. His work rate's up, but I think he just would have just outpointed Hadler the same way Sugar Ray did in they fight. He would have did the same thing Sugar Ray did. And like you said, people always say Sugar Ray would beat Floyd Mayweather, but I beg to differ. I think Mayweather would have beat him. I think it would have been a close fight, but I think he would have beat him. I think Hearns might would have been his toughest fight because of his length. Yeah. But then once again, people don't understand. It's a reason why people don't throw a lot of punches with Mayweather. Everybody outpit gets cut in half. Even Manny Pacquiao, what they say is maybe the most gifted offensive fighter of all time. Some people say. Yep. And when he fought Mayweather, I think he threw a little over 100 punches the whole fight.
No, he threw more than that. He only landed like 91 punches.
Yeah, 91 punches, and I think he didn't throw a lot. I mean, I think he threw like half of what he normally throws in a fight. So it's a reason why these guys is not, the output is not that high. It's because the more you throw, the more you're gonna get. And Mayweather, like they say, he plays so many mental games in the ring. It's fatigue. It wears you out. So because he switches up his style so many times in the fight. So I think to me he would have beat all four of those guys, but I think Hearns would have been the toughest guy out of the four. So that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, man, I agree with you, man. I mean, you gotta look at it, like I said, all this is subjective because the generation before us, they're gonna disagree with us. They're gonna look at this video and be like, y'all wrong as hell. Ray Leonard would have beat the shit out of Floyd.
Yeah, I know. I tell you the truth, the guy that I think would have gave him the most problems that I would have liked to see is Sweet Pea. I think Sweet Pea would have gave him a hard time.
I agree. I think if Sweet Pea never was on drugs, man, he would have stuck to his craft like he's supposed to have been. Sweet Pea would have been the all-time great. Because in most people's eyes, he beat the two fighters that people say are great, which are De La Hoya and Chavez. To me, in my opinion, he beat both of those guys. And he was robbed. So, but yeah, man, this is a topic we could talk about all day, man. But of course, we can't. We love comparing eras. It's probably what. I mean, like I said, it's all subjective, so that's like one of the things that you like to talk about, and it's fun to talk about. But let us know in the comment section what you think, man. What you disagree with, what you agree with, how you think it would have been different in Canelo's era if Floyd would have fought such and such guys, and how you think Canelo would have did if he fought such and such guys. Let us know, man. Thanks for following us, man. Keep the channel growing. I'm about to break down in a minute. This is your favorite channel, man. It's CTB. This Chin Tuck Boxing. Let him out of here, man.
All right, everybody. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification button, comment. The icon at the bottom, just click on that icon and hit subscribe. You know why? Because we love boxing and you love boxing. But most of all, God, peace, and love, and we out of here.